Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. I'll be joined by our Week in Review guests for our regular show in just a moment. But first, some of today's top stories, starting with breaking news this evening. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died tonight of metastatic pancreatic cancer. Ginsburg was appointed to the High Court in 1993 by then-President Bill Clinton and served 27 years all the way up until her death. Now, before her tenure at SCOTUS, Ginsburg was known as a trailblazer for women and a staunch advocate of gender equality. She became widely revered in popular culture as one of the court's liberal members and the subject of the book and film On the Basis of Sex. Ginsburg had battled multiple bouts of cancer. Now, just back in August, WTTW News spoke with Ginsburg's son, James Ginsburg, a Chicagoan and founder of a classical musical label. Ginsburg talked then about what motivated his mother to keep working despite her health struggles.
She said herself, she will continue to do this job as long as she feels she can do it full steam, which she certainly does feel right now. And as far as accomplishing, I think she has such an important voice, and the notoriety, literally, that she's gotten, I think helps amplify her voice and her message to the wider public. And I think especially at this time, that's a very important thing.
Justice Ginsburg was 87 years old, and we'll have more with our Week in Review panel on this late-breaking news. In other news, Chicago has labor peace with the city's firefighters union, but for now, Mayor Lori Lightfoot and City Council officially signed off on a new collective bargaining deal with the union representing 5,000 firefighters and paramedics. But it's a short-term agreement that expires in less than a year, so the two sides will soon have to be back at the bargaining table. Now, this current deal includes $95 million in back pay and a 10% pay raise in exchange for firefighters contributing more toward their health care costs.
At the outset, we walked into a circumstance where literally every public safety contract was open and unfinished and had been expired for a number of years. I don't sign on to that. I want to make sure that we are getting a deal done that is fair for the members, that is fair for the taxpayers, but getting it done in a timely fashion.
The city's still far apart on a deal with the FOP representing Chicago police officers. We'll have more on that later in the program. 24 counties in Illinois, not including Cook, are at a warning level for COVID-19. That means at least 2 COVID risk indicators have increased, like hospital admissions and emergency room visits. The Illinois Department of Public Health issued the warning today saying, quote, some of the common factors for an increase in cases and outbreaks are associated with university and college parties, as well as college sports teams, large gatherings and events, bars and clubs, weddings and funerals, long-term care facilities, correctional centers, manufacturing plants, schools, and cases among the community at large. General transmission of the virus in the community is also increasing. At the same time, Will and Kankakee counties can return to phase 4 of the reopen plan today because positivity rates in those counties have dropped from 8% to 5.6%. So that means things like indoor dining is back on. Meanwhile, the state announces more than 2,100 new cases of the coronavirus and 20 additional deaths. That makes for a total of more than 270,000 cases and 8,400 deaths. The state's testing positivity rate is at 3.6%. And joining us now from various locations around town are Dan Petrella of the Chicago Tribune, Craig DELLIMORE of WBBM News Radio, Cheryl Ray Stout of WBEZ, who's broadcasting right now from Wrigley Field, and Dan Mihalopoulos of WBEZ. Folks, we got to dig into the recently breaking news. Craig DELLIMORE, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, dead at 87. What is her lasting legacy on the court?
I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg helped raise the profile of the court. Her being such a personality and also being known for dissents, I think that also gave people more of a look into the workings of the court. So I think that is it, and obviously her advocacy for women's issues is going to be something that lives long after her.
Cheryl Ray Stout, she was one of 4 reliably liberal justices on the Supreme Court, given the makeup today. What do you think the impact of her death is going to be?
I think it's going to be a political warfare from now until the election. I think we're going to see some people trying to use this to ram through a new justice to make sure that it stays conservative or get another conservative justice in there. Here's an interesting quote that she gave to her granddaughter before she died. "My fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed." She spoke a lot.
So clearly, clearly, she's making her will known there about what happens with her seat. Dan Mihalopoulos, Senate President Mitch McConnell, famously would not have confirmation hearings for Obama's Supreme Court Justice Merrick Garland, citing a rule that he didn't want to do it in an election year. It's an election year, 45 days from an election. Will there be a replacement nominated in hearings?
Yeah, the case that you're talking about that happened roughly 4 years ago in 2016 involved Anthony Scalia, and that happened on February 13th of 2016. The excuse was that let's wait until the election and see what happens. Now we lose another member of the Supreme Court shortly before the election, much closer to the election than Scalia's death. But already there's talk about maybe getting something done before the voters weigh in, or certainly before there can be potentially a change in administration later this year.
I should note that we hear the Star Spangled Banner there. I believe that's at Wrigley, where Cheryl Ray Stout is coming to us. Dan Petrella, how does this play into the election? Already a tense, dramatic, angry election in many ways. Is it just going to ramp up further?
Yeah, that's right. You know, there were a lot of Republican voters in 2016 who maybe had misgivings about Trump, but held their nose and voted for him because they were concerned about the makeup of the Supreme Court and making sure that it remained a conservative majority. So if they, after 4 years of a Trump presidency, are having misgivings once again, this might make them once again decide that they need to vote for someone who they believe will install a new justice who will more closely align with their values on things like abortion and other big ticket issues. I guess another question is whether this motivates some Democrats who maybe are less than enthusiastic about Joe Biden as the candidate to get out there and vote to make sure that they can try to get a Supreme Court justice who more closely aligns with their views on those controversial issues.
All right, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this a lot next week and the weeks to come. Just a political earthquake today. And of course, our condolences to the family of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, including her son, James Ginsburg, a Chicagoan and the CEO of a classical music record label here. All right, let's move on to some of the other stories of the week. COVID has a big impact on state finances this year. Here's the dire picture that Governor Pritzker painted.
Without help from Republicans in Washington, that translates directly into potential layoffs and a massive reduction of essential services for families across our state. That will deepen our economic recession and cause pain for all Americans.
Craig DELLIMORE, Illinois is no stranger to fiscal issues. How dire is the budget picture now?
Well, I don't think anyone has seen anything as devastating as the COVID-19 shutdowns caused. So yes, it's a big hit. And what the governor is saying, he's calling it a nightmare scenario. He has asked his all of his department heads, his cabinet, to prepare budgets for this year that would be a 5% reduction in their budget, and then for next year a 10% reduction. So this is serious, and it's all dependent on whether or not the federal government, whether Congress approves aid for the state that would include replacing lost tax revenue.
Dan Petrella, 5 to 10%, does that really make up the difference? I mean, this is a massive economic hit the state is taking and a massive loss in revenue.
Yeah, that's right. They're estimating that between the two budget years, the one we're in right now and the one that will begin next July 1st, it's about a $6.5 billion hit to the state's general fund that they're expecting. This year's budget is about $43 billion in spending. So it is going to be a big impact, and these are just projections. It could get a lot worse depending on how bad in the colder months, how we have to shut things down again to deal with new outbreaks, things like that. You know, there are some people on the Republican side of the aisle who have said, you know, why didn't we approve a budget not expecting to get further help from Washington? Why didn't we make these cuts when we were down in Springfield in May and early June passing the budget for this year? And try to do the belt tightening then rather than coming back and doing it after the year has already started.
Yeah, and certainly the governor makes no bones about the fact that he is seeking more money from the federal government. Dan Mihalopoulos, with no deal in sight in Washington, is that money likely to materialize?
It seems that it's not going to materialize, at least not imminently. Again, the same divide that we were talking about earlier with the Supreme Court appointment. I think you're looking at a House that's led by Nancy Pelosi that wants to do something, and a Senate Republicans who are in control there, and the White House who are opposed to that. Let's go back months into the early part of the pandemic, and states such as Illinois talking about getting funding for the loss of revenue from the pandemic. And quickly it was politicized to be like, well, why should we be giving money to these states that already had problems? Illinois had deep financial problems, obviously, before the coronavirus pandemic really hit us. And why should other states be helping us? But I think if you look at things much more dispassionately, you'll see that traditionally states like ours are giving a lot more to the federal government than we are getting. That's undoubtedly true that in the case of Illinois and a lot of the states where you're seeing opposition to helping out states now, those states are ones that are really leeches on the body of the rest of the country.
And Pritzker has made that point, that Illinois essentially is a donor state when it comes to federal tax revenue. All right, let's move on to the Big Ten big announcement this week. The conference's commissioner, Kevin Warren, talked about what he sees as the upside of the decision to have football.
The only focus and goal that we've had over the last 40 days was to safely allow our student athletes to return to competition so they can fulfill their dreams of being able to get a world-class education at one of our 14 institutions, but to be able to compete at the highest possible level from an athletic standpoint.
Cheryl Ray Stout, the athletic directors were pretty unanimous a couple months ago in not playing football. What changed?
It wasn't the athletic directors. It was the presidents and the chancellors that voted on it. And 3 schools did not vote for the close down. And of course, moving forward, a couple of things happened. One, you had other colleges that went ahead and did their schedule. 2, you had pressure politically. You had pressure from the athletic directors. You had pressure from the coaches. You had pressure from the parents. The students are a byproduct of this too. So with that said, they've been pressured in it. And then all of a sudden, now they have an antigen test that they can take that it can find out more about the virus quicker. It's going to be a minefield. They're going to try to play 8 games starting on October 23rd. But there's already been 13. In fact, today there was more schools that are canceling games. There was 13 before today. There was a couple more today of college football games being canceled. So it's no question they are really playing Russian roulette with these kids' lives.
Yeah, and at the same time, we read that Wisconsin actually had an outbreak on its football team, 42 members of the team and coaching staff. So Cheryl, how does that play into their scheduling? And
here's what they said they'll do. If a player tests positive, they have to be in quarantine for 21 days. And after that, they have to go to the hospital to take a heart test, to make sure that they don't have any issues. Now that's 3 weeks. And they also said if there's 5% positivity rate as far as the college team, and if there's 7.5 of the population, that includes the staff, the coaches, and all that other personnel, if that happens, then they have to be shut down for 7 days for practice and also 7 days for a game. So with that in mind, it's still kind of iffy. And here's the other thing. They're not testing every student that's not an athlete. And I think that's the bone of contention with a lot of parents, is that you're giving it to the football players. And why are you giving it to the football players? Because that's where the money's at.
Right. There's certainly so much money in colleges with college football, millions and millions, hundreds of millions. And despite protests from parents and coaches across the state of Illinois, Governor Pritzker singled out youth football as an especially risky activity during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Some sports, like youth football, are more difficult and offer a higher likelihood of transmission. Over the summer, we saw outbreaks across Illinois and the world. tied to a variety of youth sports leagues. Those continue today, even among the lowest risk youth sports.
So long story short, Craig DELLIMORE, despite college football returning, Governor Pritzker says Illinois high school football will not be coming back despite some pleadings from coaches and parents. Is Pritzker likely to change his mind on this?
I don't think so. In fact, when it was brought up at his news conference that all of the states, Midwest states around, were letting sports go forward, the governor said, if they want to risk the lives of those students, let them. But I'm not doing it here. And I think what we have to remember is that, you know, I've heard the argument that people say, well, they're not catching the COVID in the sports team and with the teams. They're doing it at parties. But the problem is that these students, these team members are going to the parties and then they're bringing it back to the locker rooms. So maybe they're not catching it in the locker room, but they're going to be spreading it in the locker rooms. And I think that's what the governor is thinking about. I think that's what the medical experts are telling him.
All right, let's talk about another item in Springfield. The House inquiry into House Speaker Mike Madigan, who is under federal scrutiny, is moving forward. U.S. Attorney here, John Lausch, says, go ahead, call witnesses, take a look at evidence as long as it doesn't interfere with grand jury testimony or any other things that we're doing. Dan Petrella, where is this likely to lead?
Well, at this point, all the witnesses are being asked to voluntarily appear before the committee. So it really is up to figures like Mike Madigan, his close confidant, longtime associate Mike McLean, various current and former ComEd officials, whether they want to come down to Springfield and appear before this committee and be questioned. It's a bipartisan, evenly split committee, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. So to get a majority of the committee to agree on issuing a subpoena to anyone would mean somebody would have to cross party lines to do it. And the Democrats have already made pretty clear that they think the Republicans are trying to politicize this process in the lead up to the election. There was some arguing back and forth about what exactly the U.S. Attorney told the lead Democrat on the committee, Representative Chris Welch, and the lead Republican, Representative Tom Demmer. They had dueling statements about what they were told they could and couldn't do on the call. So
right, apparently they were on the same phone call.
Fight.
They were on the same phone call. They took something different away from it. All right, let's move on to some other stories this week. The judge who appointed the special prosecutor in the Jussie Smollett case loses support from the Cook County Democratic Party. Is it retaliation? Stormy contract negotiations between the controversial police union chief and the mayor. The city shuts down several streets for celebrations for Mexican independence. And a city watchdog says the Civilian Office of Police Accountability missed deadlines to release more than a quarter of videos showing police violence in recent years. All right, Dan Mihalopoulos, for the layperson, explain to us why it matters that the Cook County Democratic Party boss, Tony Preckwinkle, declined to back Judge Michael Tooman for retention. Tooman, of course, being the judge who assigned a special prosecutor to look into State's Attorney Kim Foxx's handling of the Jussie Smollett case. This is really complicated. Simplify this for us.
It's very complicated, but what it all boils down to really is the independence of the judiciary. We know that it's a highly politicized process, and we've gotten some bad judges through that process, frankly. The question is Michael Tooman being treated fairly? Is he one of those judges that should not be kept? And it's, of course, very important because we have the courts down at the Daly Center. We have branch courts in places like Rolling Meadows and Skokie, and they hear all manner of cases, civil and criminal. In the case of Michael Tooman, he appointed a special prosecutor in Dan Webb, who looked into State's Attorney Kim Foxx's handling of the Jussie Smollett case and found some room to criticize her, to put it lightly, in a year where she's running for re-election. Now let's connect the real dots. Kim Foxx was put there as State's Attorney by Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. Tony Preckwinkle, in addition to being Cook County Board President, is now head of the Cook County Democratic Party, which, going back to the beginning here, has a big role in picking these judges and deciding whether they stay there. And so now there's a lot of bad blood between not only Foxx, Tooman, and Preckwinkle, but also really between Preckwinkle and all the judges who now don't want to support the party to the extent that they traditionally do. as Mark Brown reported today in the Sun-Times, because they feel Tooman is being retaliated against and picked on for setting Dan Webb off on his inquiry into Kim Fox.
Well, Dan, it's not just other judges that feel that way. Mayor Lightfoot weighed in saying she believed the party's move against Judge Tooman smacked of retaliation.
I think it's critically important that we have the best quality judges on the bench possible, and that they are independent. And I'm deeply concerned, and I expressed my concern to a number of people that were going to be participating in the vote today, that the optics of this are terrible. It looks like retaliation. This is not something that we should have, not in this time, and I'm deeply concerned about it.
Craig DELLIMORE, can something like this actually affect the retention of a judge like Tooman, who has been there nearly 40 years? I mean, is he at risk of not keeping his seat?
I don't think there's much of a risk of that, and that's a sad fact, is that very few judges, even when they don't have recommendations from the bar associations, very few judges lose their retention votes. People just automatically vote for the judges. But I think this at least raised people's attention to it, but I don't think he's in much danger.
All right, there's been a lot of heavy news, so let's move on to some news that we're all happy about. The White Sox snag a playoff spot with the American League's top record. I say we're all happy because the Cubs are also on their way to the postseason, we think, although they haven't clinched yet. And after a stunning fourth-quarter comeback, can Bears quarterback Mitch Trubisky find some consistency now against the New York Giants? Cheryl Ray Stout, White Sox, best record in the American League. Does this team have what it takes to go all the way?
They have the tools. They have 2 MVP candidates and Tim Anderson, and of course, Jose Abreu. You've got to feel good for Jose Abreu. He is a guy that signed with them out of Cuba 6 years ago. He re-signed with them. He begged them. He wanted to come back, and he did. And he's having the, even in a short season, he's having a great year. They have 2 outstanding pitchers in Lucas Giolito and Dallas Keuchel. And there are other pitchers that they've got a couple rookie pitchers that pitched pretty well. Dane Dunning is one. And when you look at them overall, they really solidified their outfield. Eloy Jimenez is still a work in progress. I mean, in left field. But you got Luis Robert, who's going to be a Rookie of the Year candidate. You have a lot of, there's up and down lineup, and their defense has improved quite a bit. That was a key for them.
No doubt, they're a stacked lineup and a good pitching staff. And the one complaint in all these good times that I hear from Sox fans is the manager, Ricky Renteria. They're not so happy about some of the decisions he makes to pull pitchers out of the game. Is he a manager that can take the White Sox on this, they're in this rebuild and to the final step of the rebuild?
We just talked to Rick Hahn today, the general manager of the White Sox, and he feels good about him. He wants him to be the man to do it. Think about it. It was the Cubs that fired him in 2014 for Joe Madden. You don't think that...
Ricky has that in the back of his head, I'm sure.
I think he does. But we'll see. I mean, it's been very hard because you've had so many pitching issues to deal with. They ramped up for the regular season, then they had to ramp down, then they had to ramp up again. And so you've got a lot of pitchers that have been hurt. And because of the way they've doing things, the White Sox, they just called up their #1 pick from this year. Right. And so, the Garrett Crochet. So they called him up. And so he will be the 11th player making its major league debut this season. Think about that. That's insane.
In a shortened season, nonetheless. And how about the Cubs? You're at Wrigley Field. Are they a lock for the postseason, and how far can they go?
Yeah, they're a lock. They're going to go as far as their pitching goes. Their concern is, can they get their star players, Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and others, and Kyle Schwarber? We don't know. The way the system's going to go, we don't know.
And John Lester might be one of those pitchers gone next year. Very quickly, we have 30 seconds left. Mitch Trubisky has a miserable game until the final 8 minutes. Did he turn the corner, or has he won himself one more start, holding off Nick Foles?
He'll get one more start. I think you're going to talk about the fact that they didn't have a preseason. He's got new people, but he's got to do it on Sunday, and they better do it against the Giants, because the Giants are an awful team. They have an offensive line that's really bad, so the defense should be able to play well. But Mitchell Trubisky is playing for his contract, and so that is enough incentive for him to want to have a good game.
All right, well, we'll see if he can sustain the excellent play for 4 quarters instead of just for part of the 4th quarter. We are out of time. My thanks to Dan Petrella, Craig Dellimore, Cheryl Ray Stout, and Dan Mihalopoulos. Thank you all so much. And that is our show for this Friday night. Be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then 6 p.m. Sunday for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. And then we're back at 7 o'clock next week. We'll take a closer look at Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy on the court amid news of her passing this evening. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named by elite lawyers as the top AV